Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from South Hadley, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Bloom. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. So now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
That's right, and this one's going to happen in year 2024.
And so today he'll be educating us on the Rohan Park. So tell us about the history of Rohan Park.
Okay, Kirtland School was built there. I think it was built there in the year 1907. You can look up my webpage. I started a webpage just for Rohan Park this year. And you'll see that there was a little school up there because this was a little bit of a neighborhood up there. It was the western edge of what was known as the Oakdale neighborhood. And it was also the start of James Newton's land that he started to sell out. And so both those factors brought in a lot of homes and a lot of people with younger children, and they needed a school, and they put the Kirtland School in there. Now, it's not named that anymore. After the school went away, they took it down. I think it closed in the late 70s, and they took it down 1989, and they renamed it within a year or two after that, after Robert Rohan, who for, I believe, 20 years represented Holyoke at the state rep level. And that's great. He was well respected, and they wanted to honor him. Now, the history of the Kirtland School, though, was very important for this area, and it fit very nicely into that park. It was the playground area for the Kirtland School children. They had the school mostly towards the west edge of the park, and a playground equipment set towards the eastern edge. It's a very level park for that reason, but a whole neighborhood grew up around it. All right, it grew and grew with the times. And for instance, if you go down one street called Pinehurst Street, you meet up with the home of James Newton, who later in life built a gorgeous house on the street that's still there. He moved there in 1910, and he lived there to his death, and then his wife lived there. One of his sons built a home across the street. Now, the other directions, if you go into Sargent Street, you'll meet up with a former place where the trolley came up into the neighborhood. And all homes around there are from that era. So they built about 1900s, 1920, and you see a lot of nice Victorian homes. They're not as gorgeous as the ones you might have met on Oak Street or Chestnut Street, but they're very nice. Now, every street is going to give you a little bit more. There's actually, if you go the other direction upon Sargent Street, you'll meet up with a couple of tenement houses that have been made so nicely, you barely know that they're really tenement houses. They're made in such a gorgeous fashion. And so I invite you not only to go into the park, but also to go up all the side streets and see what's up there. Read my webpage, and you'll see a lot of the features that have come about.
And what are some of the modern amenities in this field that people might enjoy?
Okay, lots of benches around, picnic tables, lots of curving walkways, very large space to play games. It was not enough for a baseball or a softball diamond. And there are play structures for younger kids inside of a fenced area, so you can bring a young child there, and they get their own space, and it's pretty safe. And any of the streets you can park on, so you have everything you need. There's no yet straight park, but maybe someday they'll get that up there. And so it's definitely a beautiful little neighborhood park around here.
And just to quickly, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, @yahoo.com. and they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. They are also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So getting back to our interview, how does this field fit into its neighborhood?
Oh, it fits very nicely because it's in the form of a rectangle, and then the houses around it are very nicely laid out, very beautiful Victorian homes. The sidewalks are very wide, so everything fits nicely together. Sergeant Street at this point is a very wide street, and this neighborhood has lots of homes and lots of kids, and so it fits in that you can very easily send your kid off to the park and enjoy themselves. It's not an enormous park, it's a smaller or medium-sized park, and so a lot can be done here, but it's not the kind of park you're going to throw a baseball field into very well or get a pool. And in terms of history, there's loads of history. You follow any one of those streets and you follow along on my webpage, you can see the history of quite a few homes. I try to put 2 or 3 homes in each direction that you can then match on my map I made, and you can see the history of that particular house. And it's not even the kind of neighborhood that can change drastically since it's surrounded by homes. You don't have to ever worry about it change into something very, very different.
And what should this field evolve into?
Okay, when I go up there, one thing I can always think about is maybe a tiny parking lot, maybe close off a little space along the edge of the road and say this is going to be the parking space for park goers. And Sergeant Street at that point is very wide, so that could happen. But most importantly for the children, maybe a spray park up here. If they're worried about drainage off this flat area into the downhill street area, then just build a good drainage system. But the spray parks have become very popular, and I think this would work. I've gone up there to see the playground set being used a lot, and the field not as much. So maybe at the beginning of the field, that is right in the middle of the park, you could put a spray park. You can keep the green space and keep move a lot of the benches to the other end, and so you have the park cut into thirds and still be a nice park.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. And he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and I do a lot of neighborhood tours, and this will be one of them.
Awesome. So today you're going to be telling us about the Oakdale neighborhood. So why was Oakdale formed?
All right, and it is definitely a formed neighborhood, contrived to be a residential neighborhood. And I would say there's 2 important factors that made it a neighborhood. The first one was just a need in the 1880s to get nicer homes into Holyoke, and people wanted to get away from the downtown. Sure, there were beautiful homes downtown in Churchill, but they needed more nice homes, a little bit away from all that mill activity. And so Oakdale was formed by 2 different people. And the first person was Orrin Allen. He started a sub-neighborhood of Oakdale. And the other person was James Newton, and the reason why is that he owned most of the western side of Oakdale compared to Allen's on the eastern side. Now, neither of them are the ones that really formed the first homes in Oakdale, though. The first homes in Oakdale were on Fairmount Square, which is the section of Oak Street between Cabot Street and Hampshire Street. And there, Leslie White, an architect and contractor, developed 12 homes, and he made them kind of the same. Each room had the first floor facade being brick, and they were all nice Victorian homes. Some were Queen Anne style, some were shingle style. And he had formed that in the 1880s, and he was quite successful. There were some gorgeous houses on that one block. But that got Orrin Allen to thinking, my gosh, I could come in here and make the whole neighborhood on my father's farm residential neighborhoods with new streets. So streets like Sycamore Street were put in there, and the very edge of Franklin, the midsection of Franklin and Sargent were started. And he also put his own house there, trying, again, like in the Highlands, to have a gorgeous house so that people went by and they say, oh, I could have a house up here that looks as good as that. And he ended up having made about 200 homes in the Oakdale section. And one thing that came along next was the trolley. The trolley came from downtown right up Sargent Street, going on to Northampton Street. And so you started having the ability to get up further in Holyoke. And what that did was expand Oakdale even further to the west. And this is where the James Newton's land was being sold. He, even when he was alive, decided, I could make a good profit off the sale of my land that I have up here. He had the Pine Horse, his home up in Oakdale. And so he started selling a lot of his land, a lot of side streets on upper parts of Franklin and Sargent, developed during this time from about the year 1900 to about the year 1915. And if you go up there, you can see that a lot of the buildings look like they're the same age. So that's how the Oakdale ended up being formed.
Now, describe the two cemeteries in Oakdale.
All right, now the boundaries of Oakdale are quite erratic. I'll explain that in statement 3, but the boundaries are such that the two cemeteries, Forestdale and St. Jerome's, form the northern edge of Oakdale. The southern edge of Oakdale are formed by Beach Street, especially where the Holyoke Hospital is now. The eastern edge of Oakdale is right around the Oak Street. And then the western edge of Oakdale is going up a bit up Cherry Street, and then it ends abruptly. So the cemeteries really are the biggest feature in Oakdale. St. Jerome's is enormous, and Forestdale is even bigger. And Forestdale is a beautiful garden-style cemetery. So you have gorgeous open space. And also towards the west, you're starting to go up the hill, which is along the side of Crafts Hill, and they made community field out of there. And it's true that in the older neighborhoods of Holyoke, they try to put a large park into every neighborhood. And so community field became Oakdale Park, and it was very big. So the two cemeteries really help define it and keep it green. And there are two different denominations. One's Catholic and one's Protestant. And if you notice, in this neighborhood, there are no churches, but there is one school. And so it did have what every neighborhood should have: stores and school and cemeteries, but no churches.
So quickly, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or want to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour, and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you are interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214B@yahoo.com. And they're perfect for fun, educational, outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. And they're also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So getting back to our interview, why does Oakdale have the most erratic borders of all the neighborhoods in Holyoke?
All right, the first two neighborhoods of Holyoke by age are Elmwood and what became the Highlands, which was first called Ireland Parish. And those sandwich Oakdale. So you have these two oldest of the 15 neighborhoods sandwich a contrived neighborhood called Oakdale. So Oakdale had to fit in where these other two ended. And so if you look at the border along the northern edge where Highlands is not that erratic, but as it fits into Elmwood, it is very erratic. Because Elmwood was a neighborhood that was very old, and then they got a trolley, and that redefined it a bit, and you have this border along, especially along its northwestern edge, that zigzags. And so the border of Oakdale also has a zigzag. And so instead of smooth borders like almost every other neighborhood of Holyoke, Oakdale has a big zigzag. And that starts around the Franklin Street area, and then as it goes towards Cherry Street and inwards, it starts to zig and zag back and forth. So some people around that area don't know if they live in Elmwood or in Oakdale. But it doesn't matter, because what really matters for the city and for the voters is the precincts, and those are defined in different ways from neighborhoods.
And tell us about the Rohan Park neighborhood.
Yes, this little sub-neighborhood is where James Newton's house is very close to. This is also a major trolley stop within Oakdale. This is where the trolley went to double lane instead of single lane. Most tracks downtown are double lane. Most tracks out of downtown are single lane. But you have to have the ability to get two trolleys past each other about every mile or so. So they radio in and say, "Is the other trolley coming my way?" And then they go, then they wait for the double track, and you go on to the double track to avoid the other trolley. So there's a double track next to Rohan Park. That's a sign that was important. And Rohan Park itself was the site of the former school. The public school there was called the Kirtland School, named after the superintendent of Holyoke, who served for 25 years, Edwin Kirtland. And that school lasted for about 80 years. And then in the early 1990s, the city decided, let's take this old school that's not being used down, change it into a park. So now you have the Rohan Park, named after the former Massachusetts state rep that served Massachusetts from the District of Holyoke. And he was so popular that they named it after him. And around, if you walk around, you can see all the beautiful Victorian homes. You could look at pictures of the former school. You can walk onto any of the side streets and see how they developed, especially Pinehurst Road, which was the home of James Newton in his later life, which is a gorgeous house. So thank you for listening to this Oakdale neighborhood.
Thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com.